Good evening, everyone. I would like to invite everyone and thank everyone for joining us. This is our first webinar that we're having to celebrate our Science Month, as we know that from the 27th of July until the 27th of August, we are celebrating Science Month. So as HPW, we decided to do something and have webinars to celebrate the Science Month. Now, for those who do not know HPW stands for Habitable Planet Workshop, and it is under Access under CSIR. So just a few house rules. I would like, if your mic is not muted, can you please mute it? And if you'd like to ask a question during the Q&A, to raise your hand. May we all not share our videos so that we may allow our internet bandwidth to be able to accommodate each and every person, unless the person that wants to share the video is a speaker. Now, this is how our Science Week timetable looks like. I hope we can all see the timetable. Each and every week we'll have a science webinar that will start from 6 p.m. until 8 p.m. And today we have our first webinar, which focuses on natural sciences. And then next week, Friday, we'll have the HPW alumni, which will be a live stream from HPW, as we all know that there are two workshops that are going to happen for HPW. So the Planeteers will also be joining us during that day. And the main focus for that session is that we'll be looking at what is special about South Africa in terms of Earth science systems. And then the following week, on a Thursday, same time, same place, we'll be looking at technology and engineering. And the following week, we'll then be looking onto women in science. We all know that a lot of women are not doing science, or they are not focused upon. And one of the values of HPW is to promote science to women, especially Black women. Then the last session will be about mathematics, statistics, and physics. Now, as I have said that today we'll be looking at natural sciences, we have three amazing speakers. I cannot wait to hear all of them and learn something from them. So if I were you, wherever you're joining us from, please grab a pen and paper, because I know this is going to be very educational, and let us all learn why science is amazing together. And as I have said that we are sitting in different places and would like to know where you're joining us from. So I would like you all to take your cursors to the option that says view more. It will be next to Noxolo is sharing a screen. Can we all see that? And then please press on annotate. and then go to stamp and choose the star as your stamp. And then go to format and choose the color that you'd like to use. When you're done doing that, please take your cursor to where you are. So I am currently in South Africa in Berkeley East. So I will put my star approximately where I think Berkeley East is in the South African map. There we go. And then we can all start putting our stars from wherever we are.
I see that we have some people in the ocean in the corner.
Are we all able to navigate the annotation? Yes, no? Okay, thank you so much for letting us know where you are. We see you and we appreciate you. Now, without wasting any time, I would like to give my co-host the floor so that she may introduce our first speaker.
Good evening, everyone. Our first speaker is Ms. Mashadi. She holds a Bachelor of Science Honours in Botany. She is currently working with GREENMATTER, and we believe that she is going to bring so much to this meeting. She can give us all a brief about what she's been doing, what she studied, and how climate change affects her field. Ms. Mashadi, you may take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to this platform. It is a pleasure to be here, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I'm going to share my screen right now just to share my presentation. Just please give me 1 second. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
All right, thank you so much. As I've already been introduced, my name is Mashadi, and I'm the Junior Assistant Project Coordinator for a program called the Fellowship at GreenMatter. So we are a program that offers financial assistance to the students that are studying in environmental, biodiversity, and also the water sector. We focus on these key priority areas. So what is unique about our program is that we don't just offer the financial assistance, but we also have a professional development programs that equip our fellows with skills that are needed for them to be effective and efficient in their workplace. So just to give a bit of a background about myself, I have studied environmental sciences at the University of Johannesburg, which was completed in 2016. I have also studied honors in botany in 2017. The focus of my honors project was on DNA barcoding, which is a tool that is used to identify species in a case where you can't necessarily identify a species just by looking at it or just by using morphological characteristics. So we were creating a reference library to aid authorities or people at the airport, because sometimes we find that people come to the airport from other countries or from South Africa to going to other countries with species that are illegal, like rhino horns. So sometimes we find that the species, they bring the species in a form of powder. And if you look at a powder, you can't necessarily tell that it is a rhino horn. So DNA barcoding will help to identify that it is a rhino horn, because in order to conserve a species, we actually need to know what we are conserving in the first place. So in today's talk, we are going to talk about biodiversity. South Africa is rich in the diversity of species. It is the third most biodiverse country after Indonesia and Brazil. It's a home to the big five animal, and also it has 27 wetland species declared as of international importance, and it's a home to more than 20,000 plant species. However, we see all this biodiversity being threatened, and according to an article written by WWF in 2017, they have stated that 10,000 species go extinct every year. And this is concerning. Human activities are a major threat to our biodiversity. And as the overpopulation and also unemployment is rising, it worsens the situation, because people are always looking for alternative ways of making money. And some resort to things like the trade of species in order to feed their families. And this trade of species is ranked among the top 5 profitable yet unlawful trade, alongside drug smuggling, weapons, counterfeit goods, and human trafficking. In these pictures, it's examples of some of the illegally traded species. The first one is Encephalitis species, and the population of this species is declining. Most of them are either vulnerable or critically endangered. There is actually a reserve in Limpopo, in Guyana, called the Mujaji Cycad Reserve, where the cycad species are being protected. They actually naturally occur there. They just made it a protected area in order to protect them. So when I was still an intern at LIDED, we visited that reserve, and we actually found that even in protected areas, we still see people trespassing and harvesting this species. And now the population of cycad is declining. And the second one here on the picture is Brackenregia, and it is found in the Tengwe Nature Reserve, which is in Venda. This species is critically endangered. When I was still an intern, we have visited the Tengwe Nature Reserve, and we were told by the rangers that people harvest this species, the bark of this species, because they believe that it chases evil spirits away. And even though there are rangers there trying to monitor the situation, we were told by them that people actually come and harvest the species at night. And usually the rangers don't work at night. And so the population of this species is declining massively. And the last species here on the right side is called Cathaegelus, which according to the Sangbi National Red List is of least concern. However, it is actually one of the most harvested species in Limpopo. The leaves of these plants are harvested and sold to the Somalians because they chew the leaves in order to suppress the hunger, but it also acts as a energy booster, more like your BioPlus. It has a component called cathinone, and this component increases alertness. It makes you more focused, and because of that, this species is listed under Schedule 2 of the Drug Act alongside with other drugs such as cocaine, which means that it is very dangerous. But honestly speaking, I don't think that it is dangerous. Like, the people that chew those leaves don't have any effects like getting high or anything like that. They are just normal, and they're just normal. So because of this species is illegal to be harvested, what a lot of people do is that they end up cutting the whole tree instead of harvesting the leaves, or harvesting what they want, because they want the fresh leaves. So they end up cutting the whole tree, which put the population of this plant at stake. We have actually visited a few populations in Limpopo, and in some areas there was literally nothing. And they just told us that the reason why we do this is because when you are stealing something, you don't have time to think about, the environmental impacts or the harvesting. What you're thinking about is, oh, how can I do this without being caught? And we have even, interviewed some farmers, because it also occurs in some nature reserves. And the farmers told us that they decide to cut the whole tree, the bark of the whole tree, because people come into the nature reserve and not only harvest it, but they also put other animals at stake. They hunt things like impalas and kudus. So the farmers just decide to use herbicides in order to make sure that the species doesn't grow, just so, they don't experience the illegal harvesting from the surrounding communities. And we see that the illegal harvesting of species is not only limited to plants. There are animals which are being harvested, or that are being traded rather. Animals like abalone, pangolins, and rhino, they are harvested for different purposes. Abalone and the rhino horns, some of them are used to make things like drugs, and some of them are used for medicines. And according to Global Initiative 2018, more than 6 million abalone were smuggled, and over 8,000 rhinos were poached in the last decade. And South Africa has the largest population of rhinos, and yet the poaching is so high. And what makes it difficult is the fact that sometimes these things are inside jobs, because they are within protected areas. Sometimes, they kind of work with people within those protected areas, and it makes it difficult to catch the culprit. And also 1 million pangolins were killed. As the movement of people around the world is made easier, people being allowed to move from one country to another, some end up introducing species either intentionally or unintentionally. Sometimes people just go to a different province or a different country and see a species that they like or that they feel it can be used for commercial purpose and bring it to their country. And unfortunately, some of the species have become invasive. Invasive are taking our biodiversity, and it has negative impacts like reducing the surface runoff. They spread very fast, not giving our indigenous plant a room to grow, and they intensify wildfires. And I mean, one of the biggest impact that this alien invasive have on our natural resources is that of water, because as South Africa, we are known as a water scarce country. So water is a crisis in South Africa, but the alien invasives are making the situation very worse. And so there are different programs that are working towards combating these problems, like Working for Water, the Department of Environmental Affairs. They are working at investigating ways that can be used to eradicate this species. Some of them are done mechanically just by uprooting the species. Some of them are done chemically, which is quite expensive. And most of the farmers cannot necessarily afford it. And lastly, the biological control, which the Working for Water is working together with the ARC to investigate the biological control, which can be introduced into the country for that specific species. So it's basically going into a country where the species originate from and getting the natural enemy, because the alien invasives do not have enemies. So they go to that country and look for the enemy of that species and come and introduce it to South Africa to be a host of that species. And another threat that is another threat to our biodiversity is climate change, which is rising global temperatures because of carbon dioxide emissions. And this climate change has impacts like rising sea levels and droughts. And I remember in 2015, we had a heat wave, and South Africa, and more especially Limpopo, is prone to drown. It was so hot and that the animals were even struggling to get water. So if we are not taking these things seriously, ultimately the livelihood of human beings will be impacted, but also that of animals as well. So why should we take this serious? Why should we value biodiversity? First of all, biodiversity acts as our natural capital because it gives us the kind of services that no money can buy. The wetlands, they help with regulating the floods. Our trees, they help to make the world more cooler. And also we use biodiversity or plants for food, plants and animals actually for food, and also for medicine. And our economy is dependent on biodiversity through tourism. And so how can we manage this biodiversity? South Africa has a great legislation in place, legislation like National Environmental Biodiversity Act 10 of 2004, which which does not allow people to be in possession of species that are threatened. And also we have Invasive Act, which divides the species in different categories. Some categories, it's species that needs to be completely eradicated. Others can be planted, but they need to be controlled. And again, we have education awareness programs. And another thing that will help us to manage our biodiversity is having trained or skilled leaders, which is where GREENMATTER comes in. So GREENMATTER, we aim to develop leaders to equip them with the skills that are needed for the workplace. And they go through our fellows go through a professional development program. And this is the process that they go through. They go through personal growth and well-being. And we also focus on building relationships through mentorships and also just developing the leadership development. And we believe that with the skilled leaders, we can actually combat the issue of biodiversity. We actually had a career coaching session with our fellows, and our fellows were just speaking about the issues that we as young people face in getting jobs in this industry. And one of the fellow has stated that we find that most of the time when we look for a job, it's always we want project management, we want botany and communication, botany and digital marketing. And so this is the gap that we as GREENMATTER are trying to close by not only focusing on academics, but also trying to equip them with other skills that they would need at the workplace. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Mushadi. That was a lovely presentation. I would like to open up the floor to any questions. Or feedback. If you do have any questions, just unmute your mic and go for it. Okay, if there are none at this moment, we shall move on to our second speaker. And oh, Sishle has a question. Go for it. No, not Sishle, but you have a question. Go for it.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for the lovely presentation. It was very informative, and I have learned a lot. As long as I'm on the environmental side, I think I had to be part of this so that I can get such information. I'm a big fan of the GREENMATTER. I have attended the environpreneurs bootcamp that we holding just recently. Now my question is on the part of the on how to stop, for example, the poaching and also the illegal trading. And as you said, that South Africa has a very good laws. So according to you, in terms of implementing these laws, is really South Africa in implementing these laws? Like, are there any people who are being held accountable of selling illegal plants and also for poaching? If not, what do you think should be done to also stop this illegal poaching? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Site, for the question. I do believe that in some cases, people are being held accountable, but in other cases, people are not being held accountable. And I think that corruption is making it so difficult because sometimes you find that we actually went to a reserve the other time, that was back then in 2018. We visited a reserve called Atherstone, and they have rhinos there. And the manager told us, we're always catching the same people. These people go to jail, but always comes back. So it's the same poachers that we are catching every time. So in some cases, accountability is there, but honestly, in most cases, I feel like things like corruption is just making it difficult. I hope I answered your question.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question or say something related to the talk?
Yes, please.
Go for it.
Hi, Mushadi. That was a nice presentation. It was so informative. I have a question with regards to the GREENMATTER institution. Is it an institutional initiative? Sorry. Do they have any maybe opportunities for maybe a master's students who want to like embark on the environmental related research or something? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Makatu, for the questions. At the moment, because we are a nonprofit organization, we depend on funding. So at the moment, we don't have any opportunities that are advertised within the GREENMATTER Fellowship. However, recently there was an INVASIVE bootcamp, which is for a program where people just basically bring up the idea that they have for the business they want to start, and they are taken through the whole ideation phase to try to refine their whole concept, helping them in terms of the market, finances around the business and how they can go about it. But in terms of the bursaries, our bursaries are actually for honors, masters and PhD, but at the moment we do not have anything advertised. Should we have anything, please check out our Facebook page. We will definitely advertise opportunities there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for your questions. If anyone has any more questions that they would like to ask, please write them down and keep them for the discussion panel at the end of the session. Our next speaker is Dr. Moses Okupeku, who is the senior lecturer for the genetics department at UKZN. He will be giving us a talk on what he does and his field and how climate change has impacted it. Take it away, Dr. Okupeku.
Thank you, Shiris. I am humbled at this August invitation, and I want to say my big thanks and appreciation to the organizers and for the opportunity to address young ones in line with what I do. I am by profession a geneticist. My name, Moses Okupeku. I am a senior lecturer with the discipline of genetics at the University of KWAZULU-NATAL, precisely on Westview campus. My research interests are quite varied. And the reason for that is because I see biology as a bridge spanning through the life sciences. And then the key instrument in understanding genetic relatedness and inheritance lies in the DNA. So there is a little caption in front of my lab saying that I do science wherever DNA is found. And so you will find me doing a couple of research in animal and plant diversity. I have had research that we're looking at origin of domestication. I have done a couple of things on diversity and evolutionary studies. I also dabble into genetics of infectious diseases, trying to understand the genetic footprint for selection of certain genes that impact on susceptibility and resistance to such diseases. In a nutshell, my interest also spins into climate change as it affects our plants and livestock that are used for food and for sustainable food security. And today, I will be speaking to the issue of the role of a geneticist in climate change effects. And then when you look at the word itself, climate change, you want to understand it. You want to know how it impacts our biodiversity and the ecosystem. And to crack it down to the lower perspective as I see it, I'll be speaking to causes of climate change. I'll be looking at consequences of climate change effects. And before I wind down, I want to talk to you on concerns and collective responsibility to stem down the climate change effect if we cannot eradicate it immediately. So first of all, what causes climate change? If I ask anyone in this environment right now, everyone will have one point or another. But in general, the activities of humans are the precursor of climate change. These activities of human are necessary activities, such as the felling of woods to make cookings so that we'll feed, the destruction of forest areas to make ways for transportation, the building of cities and towns to create urbanization. They are all necessary. And as we begin to grow and economy begin to thrive, we want to make life easier. So industrialization fits into it also. So the development of the first, second, and the third industrial revolution created a whole lot of activities that are today impacting on our climates. And what we find is that the product of these human activities stemming out from industrialization and all the rest would include the production of the carbon dioxide, which is a basic gas that should not be harmful, because every living mammal or animal will take in the oxygen in order to power the cells and gain energy to do the normal activities. And then in return, carbon dioxide is exhaled as a byproduct. And nature, in its natural setting, has a way of balancing this. The plants, they take up the carbon dioxide in order to synthesize their own food. And so it is balanced out. However, with deforestation. We lose the plants that are able to absorb our carbon dioxide and recycle them to give us back oxygen. With indiscriminate cutting of plants, the development of our cities and all of these, we find that most of these gases produced, in addition to other toxic ones that come from the ejection system of our automobiles, aircraft, and industrial waste, we find all of this trapped in the atmosphere. What they do is that they create a platform for the penetration of the heat from the solar system into our planet. But then at the same time, they cushion the gas from going out. And that way they create a kind of greenhouse effect, invariably heating up the whole system. And this greenhouse effect is what leads to what you refer to as global warming. The result is gradual increase in atmospheric temperature, the steady or continuous rise of our sea level. And no matter how young you are here, you would have heard of catastrophic events all over the world, including tsunamis, earthquakes. Some of these things are triggered by the resultant effect of global warming. And this is an offset to the natural setting itself. And the organism that tends to get affected the most are the living organisms, humans, animals, and the plants around. And from what our first presenter has spoken of extensively, you will see that the effect lies heavily on the living organisms that you refer to as biodiversity. Biodiversity are the different living things living together, cohabiting in an ecosystem. And of all the known animals and plants, only a few serves as food for man and ensure food security. With the intense growth of global warming, there are basic concerns. Those concerns had been actually outlined, but I want to stress on a few that concern what leads to the things that I do. The threat to biodiversity and the ecosystem is number one. Global warming means that the temperatures are changing. We're experiencing droughts and uneven rainfall distribution. When you have such situation, the plants suffer. When the plants die, the animals are hungry. Over time, they may not survive. At the end of the day, they die out gradually, and they might die out entirely, leading to extinction. Those ones that are too few to sustain themselves and provide food for man are now regarded as endangered species. Across the globe, animals and plants that are most adapted to their original location are dying out. And then farmers, in an attempt to increase production of what is available, would breed certain animal species, animal breeds together in order to increase either quality or quantity of their production. Invariably, it is to increase profit. So in my field, I had worked with goats and sheep that are very common in the place where I come from. At the outset of my research, I discovered that in my place, you pick the goat from your neighbor and you bring it home to breed to your goat. so that they will produce either more babies or to produce bigger animals. This indiscriminate breeding at a lower setting had also extended into the industrial and commercial farming sectors, where farmers import animals that they think are more superior to what we have locally and breed them together in order to get something that produce more and get them more economic value. The resultant effect of such is that the imported animal is not able to perform to the optimum of his genetic potential. Why? Because his ability to perform at the level it will be at its optimum was actually factored out with the environment where it was developed and where it was developed for. Now, when we buy from Europe, we bring from Canada, we bring Holstein Friesian, we bring the adapted so-called bigger goods from other places, and we bred to ours. We gradually erode the genetic diversity in our population. We gradually lose the genes that make our animals more adapted to the stresses that are entrenched in their ecosystem, such as resistance to disease, resistance to drought, adaptation to heat tolerance, and much more. So when these losses begin to take effect, the resultant effect is that our local species are either completely replaced by the exotic species that eventually will not survive because they are not fully adapted. And then if for any reason our local species are not replaced, their genetic pool is diluted, and the ability of the next generation to continue to survive in the same environment is seriously reduced and depleted. So in the end, what we have is animals rather and plants that cannot survive adequately should they be exposed to stress. So what is the right thing to do? The right thing is to identify the animals that are most suited and then put them together, conserve them, whether in the place where they are originally in situ, or to create an external environment for them ex situ, where they can be brought together and be raised, particularly for use now and for future unforeseen crises. Another way to do this is to collect genetic materials that we call germplasm, that will include the eggs, the sperms, and tissues, and store them away under a very preserved condition. The most common one is the cryopreservation, where we freeze them down, and then we can bring them out hundreds of years later to replenish an area that had crisis and we've lost all of the animals or plants, or that we might actually inject them to increase economic use at the moment. So seeing all of this, what is the role of the geneticist? The FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, in the early 20s realized this concern and made some policies that the first step to determining what to conserve or preserve will be to understand the genetic architecture of those organisms. And that is why, in my own little way, my contribution to all of this started with the genetic characterization of indigenous goats and sheep across my country in Nigeria. And then that saw me doing work beyond my country and began to collaborate with scientists in America, in Asia, in part of Europe, and part of other parts of Africa. And the result is that today we have more knowledge of the genetic architecture of our indigenous livestock, and knowledge from that have been passed on to other students that I had raised or mentored, who have expanded beyond my scope, is making things more possible for policy development, as well as practical application of the knowledge of genetic characterization for food sustenance and food resource development. Also, I have hosted a number of research to understand the effect of climate change in terms of heat and its penetrance in the performance of indigenous livestock. What we find is that climate change effect can reduce the ability of our animals to perform at their maximum. So how do we know what is responsible for their ability to endure heat, to tolerate heat, and to dissipate heat? We need to profile the genes. So we had worked with zebu cattle, we worked with goat and sheep, and now we understand. And we have profiled some of the genes that speak to heat tolerance. And these are becoming very handy in preparing animals that are less tolerant to be adapted for future challenges. And apart from this, we still have a couple of work that are being done. Some of the persons on this platform today are either my current student or my past student. And currently we're looking at the genetic and adaptation, the genetic evolution of genes that are responsible for adaptation. We're looking at characterizing both plants on land and in the aquatic environment. We have a material that should be going to the press very soon, looking at molecular and physiological differentiation among the Toyota using the barcoding and morphologic technique. We're also looking at population diversity and metabolomic structure of sea cucumbers from South Africa. Why? Because they are very important economic organism, and then little is known about the products they generate. We know that they are good for food and they got some medicinal value. To identify the chemicals that make them of medicinal value, we need to use metabolomics. This and a host of other techniques are what we're exploring in the OPECU lab to contribute to stemming effect of global climate change and contribute to food sustainability and increase production and productivity of our indigenous livestock and plant species. However, before I close, I would like to say that the effect of global warming is universal. The challenge is a collective challenge, and the solution will be a solution that will not be handled by one arm of the people, but everyone must come together and form a collective force to fight in order to slow down this effect if we cannot avoid it at all, because our lives will go on, the industrial activities will continue. The byproducts of such will still continue, but if well managed, we can have our world lifespan lengthened than it is right now. And I want to say that the field of genetics is very, very viable for those who have not come on board to understand. What I hear a lot from students is that, oh, genetics is difficult. You have to do statistics. You have to know mathematics. But if you come on board, you'll see that it is very, very interesting. Today, there are certain aspects of genetics that are focused on statistical application for genetic purpose, and that will be classical and statistical genetics. So if you have flair for mathematics, you have acumen for statistical work, that will be a place for you to explore. Beyond that, we have the molecular genetics that take the molecular biology technique and explore that for unraveling genetic challenges. So if you are in biochemistry, you have a flair for biology, and you want to look at cellular stuff, you can still fit into genetics. And then when we talk about population and quantitative genetics, we're looking at the effect of genetics on the population. We're going to be using statistics and other tools to profile that. If that is your strength, please come on board and join us. Because right now, there are less geneticists all over the world than any other profession in the world. And the role that geneticists are playing is massive. And the field is so dynamic that it is continually evolving. Today, there are novel growing disciplines under genetics that are very captivating and interesting. That will include genomics, proteomics, metabolomics, metagenomics. All of these omics, they don't only speak to life sciences alone, in social science, in soil science. In fact, even in the basic humanities, in solving problems and crimes, all of this come into play. And the field of bioinformatics is a very strong tool, which if harnessed with machine learning, become a very strong predictive angle. So if your own flair is for computer science and for all the gadgeting, I recommend you to join us as a bioinformatician or a machine learning expert. And we cannot do this by ourselves. We work in tandem with ecologists, with marine biologists. There is the aspect of the forensic genetics that is used to harness crime in both in wildlife, in human science, and other areas where crimes are committed. And like I said, if you must conserve what we have, we cannot do without the conservation biologists. We need those who speak to policy to come on board and be part of this to make it work. And I do hope that with this little presentation, for those of you looking for direction to charter, you will be able to find a place here. And in UKZN, we welcome everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to talk. God bless you all.
Thank you, Dr. Kopeko, for that wonderful presentation. Is there anyone with any questions? Okay, if there are, okay, and Lisa, go for it.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Cherise. Thank you so much, Doc, for your presentation. I joined in quite late, but for the points that I got, I fully understood, and it was a great presentation. I only have one question, though. Where you spoke about freezing I'm not sure I stand corrected, but in my understanding, freezing eggs of certain animals right now to use them in the future, like in 100 years or something like that. So my question now came in my head. I'm thinking, wouldn't the environmental changes, say in 100 years, be different for those animals now? Would it still be favorable for the animals to survive in environmental changes of that time than when the time the eggs are harvested? I'm not sure if I'm making sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sisi, for your brilliant observation. But the question is, what gave rise to this freezing technique? Long before now, we know that this world had existed longer than we know of it. And scientists had discovered mammoths. These were type of elephants of the ancient time in frozen ice. And they found that for the period that they were frozen, they remain constitutionally the same, because their biological system, their body did not suffer much decay and degradation. They were fully preserved. And then if you look at the old world and the current world, if you look at the map of the world in, say, about 1,000 years ago and now, you will see that the structure had changed very, very massively. The fear we have with global warming and climate change effect is that with the consistent rising of this water body, if not stopped, areas like Los Angeles, like Durban, that are very close to the sea, might end up underwater. Right now, with the constant depleting of the ice holding the North and the South Pole together, if climate change continues at that space, it's foreseen that there might be a toppling of the environment. Where it's arid today might become a complete swamp or directly sitting under the waterbed. And where we have normal water body now might be exposed to be a clear land area. We'll be facing new environments and new challenges, no doubt. But then the animals and plant species that we have right now will not survive. If we survive and we can salvage some, we will know what animal was surviving well in the tropics, what was doing well in the temperate region, and the possibility of reintroducing some of these through genetic processes are the view that geneticists have. It's an ongoing study. And then for over 200 years right now, ideas have been rolling in. And then with young people surrounding us, I'm sure, when you begin to contribute your brilliant ideas to it, one day we will get there. But definitely the cryopreservation of germplasm is one way of sustaining germplasm for the future. And it does not have any complication as at now. We have known also that there are parents who couldn't give birth and they have frozen down their semen or their ovary for a period of time. And when these germplasm were fertilized, they were tore down and fertilized after over a decade or two, they were still viable and they still formed living organisms. And this science is what geneticists are hoping could be part of the security or insurance for our world should global change, global warming become very serious and unmanageable. We'll know that the earth has been destroyed before. We pray it will not fall down in our time. And should it happen, let's hope that the future can be savage. I hope this answers your question, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Kopeko.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Annalisa. Thank you, Dr. Kopeko, for answering that. Do we have any other questions or comments? Okay. If we do have any questions that we think of after going through the talk in our head, please write it down and keep it for the discussion session. We were going to go into a break 20 minutes ago, but we're running behind. So if it's okay with everyone, we would like to go on to the last talk, which is by Mr. Eric Lopes-Vilho. He is a PhD candidate from Rio de Janeiro in the field of botany, and he will be telling us a little bit about himself, his research, and his field.
Hello. Do you see me?
Yes, we do.
First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for Sharice Govender and Noxolo Mendedawa for the invitation. It's very nice to be here and talk a little bit about macroalgae. That is my passion. I'll start to share my screen now. So, okay. So, again, my name is Eric. I'm a PhD candidate from Brazil, from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. And my presentation is about some examples of how climate change may impact the marine macroalgae richness in Brazil. So what we call as algae represent several lineages of organisms that are unrelated to each other, with a little bit in common, except making photosynthesis and have a little differentiation in their morphology. They used to be called as protists, but now they are scattered in several kingdoms. The group of macroalgae are represented by mainly Chlorophyta, Rhodophyta, and Phyllophysa, or commonly known as green algae, red algae, and brown algae. However, we are facing the menace of climate changing, and despite the people used to think that climate change is only warming, climate change represents actually extreme oceanographic and meteorological events, and well, places where it's usually hot and dry will become hotter and drier, and places where have cyclones and rains a lot, those phenomena will intensify. So this is a grand menace to the biodiversity as a whole and to our species. And for the marine environment, we suppose that we will change the abiotic conditions that will trigger different ecophysiological responses depending on the species or the evolutionary lineages to which the algae belongs. And we don't know how exactly how each population and the species will respond in each place in the planet. As well, we don't know exactly how community may respond, but we are seeing several papers that showing the worst case scenarios with community shifts, extinctions, displacement of species, and loss in economic products as a result of economic important species become extirpated. Regarding the three groups of macroalgae, the groups that are more concerned are Phelphici and Rhodophyta, because they have a large amount of genera and species that are endemic. Those figures are from a paper from 2014, and the yellow and red colors indicate the places where have more gene richness, and those gene richness also may indicate places where you have endemic genera. And in understanding this menace to the biodiversity, if you check the UCN list, there are only a few species of algae listed there. And as far as we know, there is only one species that of macroalgae that is officially recognized as extinct. It was extinct probably in the 19th century. There are only two localities where it was collected, the original description and a few years later, and no one has seen this species, the Vanvurstia benetiana, in the past 100 years near the Sydney Harbor. And we know that it was not caused by climate change, but rather to human activities, but is a sad reminder of what may happen with more frequency. So I'll talk about a little bit Brazil, because I know some examples that I think that are interesting to talk. Brazil is a very diverse place. We have a large coastline, several ecosystems. We have different oceanographic conditions, and all of these are the motive of why we have so many macroalgae species, and each year we know more and more new species to science. So, we discover cryptic species, misapplied the names, and the origin of those species are very complex. Part of them are related to the Caribbean basin, others are related to groups from Indian Ocean, probably because the changes of geological and oceanographic conditions. And nowadays, our current system, oceanographic system, is controlled by the South Atlantic gyre. That originated the Bengala upper system, that later originate the South Equatorial Current, and then the Brazil Current and the North Brazil Current that goes to the Caribbean. And some problems we are facing regarding the biodiversity of marine macroalgae in Brazil. We have several groups that has a lot of taxonomic problems with poor descriptions, lack of specialists in several genera, several families, misapplied names, script and pseudocryptic species, uncertainty regarding native and non-native species, and too many places that have never been sampled, which increases our uncertainty of the real biodiversity we have here. And well, another threat is as I mentioned, the non-native species. And as you can see in the image above, Brazil is do not have any circle. It is not because we don't have any alien species here, but this is just because we don't have enough studies about alien marine species. Well, It is just to show the another threat to the marine environment, because the image in the right side shows the Brazilian economic region in the ocean, and the image in the left side show the population distribution in Brazil of about more than 211 million people. There mainly occupies the coastal region, which increases the pressure to coastal communities. And we don't know exactly how many endangered species of macroalgae we have. The Brazilian red list do not list any marine macroalgae, and we have a lot of species that we know only for the original descriptions. For example, Sargasso maximiliani from the 19th century, and Cotoneata sanguinea from the 20th century. They were collected in probably the Sargasso maximiliani was probably collected in Rio de Janeiro, while the Cotoneata sanguinea was collected in Rio de Janeiro. And this coast is very disturbed, especially the Guanabara Bay. And we have a lot of papers that has showed the long-term impacts on macroalgae. There are some examples regarding our laws of species, of laws of functional assemblages, the simplification of the communities. And I ask, how does my research have to do with climate change? As a biologist, I took an oath to study and protect life. So how can I do my part to try to understand the impacts of climate change, or how to try to mitigate? Well, my concern is either regard the most basic unit, that is the species, the evolutionary units, and especially the brown algae that I love. So I'll talk some examples of them. Here in Brazil, we don't have a rich brown algae flora as in other places. We have some Ectocapales, Cordariales, but most of the species belong to Sargassaceae and Dictyotaceae. I studied specifically with the Dictyota, which is a challenging genus because this taxonomy is very difficult to distinguish species. A lot of colleagues think it is a nightmare. The literature is full of doubtful records and erroneous distributions. Despite it has great ecological importance from the American community, and a lot of papers show potentials to biotechnological applications. The first example of how climate change may impact this group I study is Dictyota mertense. The type of locality is here in Brazil, and the southern limit of its geographic distribution in the Atlantic is the Rio de Janeiro state, which is the last area in red color. I studied the Dictyota since 2010, and I've never seen this species occurring in Rio de Janeiro, despite we have a extensive literature that points the occurrence here. So it may be related to climate change as well, the anthropogenic pressure. Other species that I worry about are some species that mainly occur in our oceanic territories. They rarely occur along the coast, but they prefer the archipelagos that have volcanic and biogenic origin in the middle of Atlantic nearby the Brazilian coast. Some of them only occurs there and in the Caribbean. And those places where they occur very vulnerable to global warming and ocean acidification, as shown this paper that showed that predicts the vulnerability by 2040 and 2050 and 2019 2100. Another threat is the, as I explained before, the extreme environmental, extreme meteorological events. For example, in 2016, a extratropical cyclone was able to push a large amount of cold waters from the subantarctic area, and a large amount of macroalgae from Falklands were washed in the Uruguayan and the Brazilian coasts. It was very unusual because Duvera Antarctica and Marcosis peripheral live on cold temperate waters, especially in the subantarctic area, and they have never been reported to Brazil. And although this area is not suitable for them to establish permanent populations, it may indicate that invasive species in Argentina, such as Dichotoma and Undaria pinnatifida, that occurs in Argentina, it may be pushed towards Brazil in such extreme events. So it is a matter to monitor. And this area with the red rectangle is have the abiotic condition that both Dichotoma and Undaria pinnatifida could establish permanent pollutions if they were able to arrive here in the Brazilian coast. Another example of species that could be in danger is Tubenar tubenata. This species is very abundant in Indian Ocean and the Caribbean, but in Brazil it only occurs in the Fernão de Noronha Island, and especially I think in one or two places there. It has very narrow distribution here in Brazil. So any change in the environmental could extinct this species in Brazil. Another species that is under threat is Jolina laminarioides. It was described to this cape in red in the map in the right side, the area of Cape Cabo Frio, now in the BIODIVERSITY. It occurs in rock shores that are under strong wave action. This area is also is under the upwelling system of Cabo Frio. This species is restricted to this area. However, it was reported to Indian Ocean, the area nearby Oman. So any environmental change here in this cape in Rio de Janeiro could also extinct this species here in Brazil. Other papers that have shown impacts on brown algae are, for instance, the paper we published last year about Guanabara Bay. Guanabara Bay is put in the yellow square that shows the loss of macroalgae assemblages, and I showed here in the map how the Dichotoma and Sargassose were estimated along the 20th century. They had a large distribution inside the bay, but as the time passed, it was expelled from the Guanabara Bay, and nowadays it only occurs outside, and it is become they are becoming more and more rare in this area. Another interesting work is the decline of brown owl assemblies, number of genera and species nearby the Brazilian nuclear power plants. The Brazilian power plant is located in the area in red color in the map, also in Rio de Janeiro state. Other works have showed the decadal loss of canopy-forming algae that here in Brazil is composed mainly by Sargassum banks. They are declining in alarming rates in terms of cover and biomass, which they are being replaced by fast-growing species and such as filamentos, surfing algae. And this is a threat because several species of animals and algae live in sargassum plants. For example, the Cotonella sanguinea that I mentioned before, that we only know for the original collection, was collected in Guanabara Bay, growing over a sargassum plant, and it has never been found again. So it could be extinct, but we really don't know. And another point is Sargassum is a very difficult genus to work about distinguished species and the systematics. So we don't know exactly how many species of Sargassum we have here. And we have a lot of names that we have to check. Another example are the so-called golden tides that are becoming more frequent. This first example was found in July 2011. It was strange because the Sargasso Sea is only known for North Atlantic. However, it was a large amount of Sargasso were found in Brazil, as well some places in the African coast. And again, some years later, a large amount were washed ashore in several Brazilian territories that I marked in Google Earth. And there is no a single explanation to it, but some researchers think it may be related to global warming, others to nutrient input, others to anthropogenic pressure, others to changing in the oceanographic pattern that may able some plants migrate from North Atlantic to the South Atlantic, but there is no consensus. This is a recent paper that was published this year about the endemic Brazilian kelp, Laminaria abyssalis. It is a relict species from the glacial from the last glacial period. It occurs in a small area between the Rio de Janeiro and the Espírito Santo coast, on between 40 to 120 meters depth. It grows over rhodolite nodules, and this area is under intense exploration, oil extraction. This work, this paper, modeled how global warming could affect the distribution, and they indicated that probably Laminaria abyssalis could migrate southwards to colder, cooler areas in the southern Brazil. However, those same areas are also under intense oil extraction. So the author suggested to include Laminaria psallis as a endangered species. So we are running out of time. We need a collaboration of research of several fields, molecular geneticists, taxonomists, ecologists, everyone who can provide new data on regarding the species that occur in Brazil, the physiological requirements they need to grow along the coast, how it may be impacted under the scenarios of climate change, as well to trying to understand how we may able or not to protect them or to recover what we have lost. So I'd like to thank you very much again to the organizers. Those are the social media links about my laboratories, the project of science and communication that I've created, as well my my social media. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric, for that lovely presentation. Does anyone have any questions related to this talk? Charles?
Oh, all right. Thank you, Mr. Philo, for a very informative presentation. So I would like to ask from your side as a researcher who is a specialist in the discipline of ecology, marine biology, particularly, okay, yeah, marine biology, and also in botany. From your side, because I've seen on your second slide, if I'm not mistaken, that you have tabulated the number of species that endangered, the number of species that have also extinct. That might be maybe due to anthropogenic pressure, such as the likes of the Tubinaria tubinata. So I just want to get from your side as that someone who is a specialist in those disciplines that I've already mentioned. Are there maybe any alternatives that maybe you do have, since you know that some of those species have been categorized as endangered species, some of them have extinct? Because I realize that your talk does incorporate a little bit from Mr. Cope. I'm not sure if I am calling his surname correctly, but I believe it's Opeko. So since he's in the discipline of genetics, so how do you make sure that you conserve those species and you also like protect those species from extinction? Do you also like do the likes of genetics and making sure that there are also other species that will maybe survive for the upcoming generation?
Hi, Charles. I don't know if I understand correctly your questions, but I'll try to answer what I understood. So first of all, well, it's very difficult to say how many species are endangered or may have gone extinct because we have simply no information. The phycology discipline here in Brazil started in 1950s. So there are just a few specialists in phycology in here in Brazil. And for many species, for many genera, we only have poor descriptions. We don't have the information regarding their ecology, their phylogenetics. So it's very difficult to say whether the names people apply actually refer to their species or are misidentifications of new species science. as I mentioned, we have the diverse coast here in Brazil with a lot of number of species, and we have a low number of endemic species. And even those endemic species, we have little information. So we have a lot of to study. And I have seen that several colleagues of mine are studying molecular phylogenetics as myself. Some of them are trying to understand the ecological role, using laboratory conditions to understand the ecophysiological response of the specific species out of our modeling uh, how the distributional may shift, but well, there are simply too much to do, and to try to better understand how climate change may impact the marine biodiversity. And I'm not only talking about macroalgae, but marine biodiversity as a whole. It is good if you may read different disciplines, a little bit of geology, oceanography, about ecology of other groups, because no species occurs alone in the sea. So as you need to read as much as possible, and this will able you to ask more and more complex questions, and we really need good questions to have really good answers to try to protect those species. Regarding this topic you mentioned, we have some marine parks in Brazil, some marine areas, but we don't know how they will suffer with global warming or ocean acidification. So maybe the areas they have may be expanded or not. So we have a lot of questions. For some species that may be endangered, it is, I don't know if it's possible to reintroduce them after growing it in laboratory. I don't know if it's possible because I didn't study it, but we have more uncertainties than certainties. So I really like your question. As I mentioned, I don't know if I understand well. What for? I can speak for myself. I started this group just studying only two species in regional agriculture. Now then I started to study the genus for the entire coast, and now I'm concerned about the marine flora as a whole. So we are trying to do our best to understand how it may impact the Brazilian biodiversity, despite our lack in funding and the mess of our economics and political situation. If I didn't answer something, please ask me again.
Thank you for that. Okay, we have two other questions. First from Sashin, then from Dr. Kupeko. Sashin, you may go ahead.
All right. Fantastic presentation, Eric. I really enjoyed it. I just wanted to ask something regarding what you mentioned now about the paucity of data. You know, there's so many questions, so much of uncertainty, and this, I suppose, such a large scale in which you're operating because of the distribution of the species. I was wondering, has this ever maybe created an opportunity for citizen science engagement? Not only relates to the macroalgae that you're dealing with, but with that sort of macrofauna on a broader scale? Thank you.
Hi, Sachin. Good question. I have several colleagues that are trying to figure out how to uses citizen science in their research. I have seen that some papers are discussing it, but I don't know how many people use this kind of data, because citizen science is a very important tool to biodiversity, but in several organisms, it's very difficult to a non-trained person identify species. For example, there are several algae that you can only identify their family or genus based on reproductive structures that you have to be lucky to see under microscope. So I don't know how reliable are the information, but yes, it is very important to try to figure out how to integrate citizen science in researches to fulfill gaps in the distributional geographical ranges of the species.
Thank you. You make good points in that regard. Yep. Fantastic presentation again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, Sachin, and for the answer from Eric. Dr. Kupeku, you had a question.
Thank you, Sharice. It's not a question, but to kind of shed a little light on the question Charles asked about issue of conservation regarding algae. Macro fungi are very, very diverse. And then from the work we're doing right now in my group, which one of the persons here is actually involved with, we have found that one of the way to go is not just to collect the samples and do our phylogenetics analysis or our barcoding, but as we collect samples, that we should have a repository in order to be able to create a mini archive. That way we have something to refer to, and then for future prospects, we will be able to continue from what we're doing, because from the look of things, the ocean is vast. These organisms are small in stature, and they can travel low to far distance depending on the enabling environment. And so the conservation is very unique and very important, because in one other project, we are trying to profile medicinal plant for cancer and some other diseases from similar organisms. But getting enough quantity from the ocean belt where they are deposited is a challenge. So if there is enough hands and interest, as well as investment in this region, we will not only be able to conserve them for immediate and future use, but we can mass produce these organisms and farm them and see if we can understand them better and exploit their strength to human benefit. So the work that our young friend is doing is a brilliant work, and I am hoping that young scientists in South Africa will take it up, because when you look at the macroalgae in the coastal region of South Africa, their story had not been told, and it's almost the same across the globe. Thank you.
Wonderful explanation, Dr. Okpeko.
Thank you to both of you. And with that, we shall move into our last session for the day, which is our Q&A or discussion session, where the floor is open to questions to all three of our presenters. Does anyone have any questions? Or anything that you would like to just discuss and have an opinion from someone else about?
Okay, so I have a question for all of our speakers. And okay, I wrote it down, so now I'm trying to find it because I wrote a lot of things. Okay, so I'd like to know if all three of you were able to call on the government to declare a climate emergency. So what specifically would you want them to do immediately?
May I go first?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Yes.
I like your question, but it's a very difficult question. Difficult in the sense that it's difficult to call climate emergency. The world have been telling the story about the emergency on hand for a very long time now. There is a one-time president of America who took it upon his shoulder after leaving office to launch a world campaign of awareness to make the whole world know that climate change is real. And there is another president in that big country that came on board and said, the whole story about climate change is horse. And so funding, research, and everything that went into climate study practically came to a halt. And so it is one thing for scientists to cry out and say, this is the situation of things. It is another thing to have those at the hem of affair to understand the language we're speaking and flow on in the same direction with us. So it is difficult to say exactly that this is what I will want to be done first. Almost everything should be done simultaneously. If we take them practically step after the other, we will succeed, but we might not get there at the time and in the state we want to get there. So that's why, for me, if you ask that question, I will not call it climate emergency, but I would encourage that right from the grassroots, from our primary school, the awareness should be created so that the generation coming behind, we understand the tragedy at hand. And then they will all begin to contribute to the management of things. Every plastic you drop in the ocean contributes to the problem. Every plastic you drop on the street carelessly that ends up in the waterway contributes to the problem. Every cigarette you smoke is contributing to this problem. And every tree that is felled and not replaced is a massive gap in the problem. Every animal going into endangered list should be jealously guarded such that they don't become extinct. But the rate of extinction is driven by the greed of men. Government place policies there. You heard what our colleague said earlier today, that people still will go still, despite the fact that these are conserved areas. So my own idea is that let's begin the campaign among our children. Let our children tell it to their parents. Let the parents understand it from the little one if they cannot get it from the scientists. And let the whole world understand that our world we are driving our world to a terminal extinguishing if we are not careful. That would be my answer, my sister. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kupeku. Would either of our other speakers like to give some input as well?
Well, may I speak now?
Yes, you may.
Well, Well, declare a climate emergency is very difficult. In my personal view, in my country, it's almost impossible to try something like that. Um, every time the government changes here, we really don't know how to. We it is not possible to expect big changes. Previous governments were able to uh, uh, achieve great improvement in environmental laws and the regulations. However, in the current situation, we have a government that deny climate change, deny science, deny and environmental protection. And even there is a incentive to deforestation and illegal appropriation of indigenous land. So it's very difficult to try convince people like that. And even the same people also blocks science funding. So obtain data to support the climate change is even difficult when you don't have funding to do it. So I really don't know. I don't know how the situation in South Africa is, but in Brazil we have a great disparity among the geographical regions. Even in the same city, we have great social and economic disparities, and we have most of the country do not have wastewater treatment. So the wastewater and the industrial wastewater are uh, transported direct to ocean, which impacts the marine communities. We have places that people discharge trash that is I don't know the word in English. That you literally pull the trash over trash over trash over trash, and you have a amount of trash. I today it is prohibited, but we have a lot of places that still do it irregularly. So I think that in my personal view, we should treat the climate change as a war to allocate all of our resources to try to mitigate and try to save as many lives and save as many species as we are able to do.
Thank you, Eric. Ms. Moshadi, would you like to add anything to that?
Hello, everyone. I think the question has been answered already, but I just wanted to add that also the change begins with us as individual. So we are the ones that needs to make that change so that our children can also learn from us.
I completely agree with you. Okay, thank you to all of you for answering that question. Is there anyone else with any questions for our panelists? No, if not, I have a question. So there are many people who believe that the earth is flat and that climate change isn't real, and I personally think that they're crazy. But I want to know about y'all's opinion on the matter. Do you believe that this belief that climate change isn't real is a result of a flaw in science communication to the general public? Or do you believe that it's just that scientists are exaggerating the climate change problem?
Thank you. I think I share the same opinion with you. those who feel that climate change situation is unreal, I would say they are just being a clown. Because if you don't know the climate situation before now, you would have seen records, and even the illiterate aged people in the villages and rural places can tell you that those days not too long ago, because they are still alive. Most of them have spent just a few decades on this planet, and they would tell you stories of the days when you are expecting rainfall on a fixed date of the month, and it's no longer the same. They tell you how much days the winter should be around before the next season is rolling in. And then the complaining is not the same. It is the same reason that is causing unnecessary evaporation of surface water, and certain areas that used to be very, very moist and agrarian are completely dried up and turned into desert. What drives all of this are not far-fetched realistic events of the effect of climate change. And then it's not as if the awareness is not there, the story is not told. Scientists have been telling the stories. The media have been flowing it. But the question is, human beings are born with a mind to believe what they want to believe rather. So it's difficult to impose what you and I believe upon everyone. But like I said, education of the elderly is not the issue, but the generation that are coming behind us. Let's start the campaign and the awareness right from our primary schools. Let's show the indices to our children. Then let's guide them along the path that would be the course that should be chartered for climate protection. And I'm sure that in another decade down the road, we should have created more awareness than we would have created if we were running with the adult folk in 20 decades. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kupeku. Would any of our other speakers like to add anything? Do you
Yes,
think that?
yes, that's like.
Go for it.
I agree we have a flaw in science communication, but it's not only the issue. We have a flaw to prepare science school teachers to educate child or the future, as mentioned by Dr. Okipeko. But regarding the belief of the adult people, we have to, in my personal view, we have to understand it is a matter of a profit, because someone or someone's are have a profit with the climate change denialism. It is related to industries, enterprises, religious peoples, groups. So every time someone is declared that denied climate change, other person is being profit with this. So it's a very complex issue.
Thank you, Eric. But do you think that maybe if we could communicate with them a bit better, that it could maybe help even a little bit with the issue?
Yeah, science communication is very important. In my experience with my project of science communication, people that usually to despair or even hate scientists after follow some of our posts on social media regarding some discoveries of Brazilian scientists, they become more receptible. I don't know if this is the right word, to receptive maybe, to learn a little bit more about science, and they diminish their prejudice regarding science and scientists, but it's a long way to go. It's a very long-term work to do with adult people, and I understand that some people is quite impossible to reach with science communication, because some things that science discover, or some hypotheses or theories, some discoveries that are supported by sciences, somehow it goes against some people beliefs. And when someone belief is threatened, this person is becomes more aggressive and even more radical to accept what science say. If I say, oh, everyone's seeing the sky is blue, but science now say that it is red, and all of us are seeing it in the wrong way because of some malformation the eye. Science say that. This example, a hypothetical example. Some people will be incapable to accept this and say that science is lying, and well, we may start a war against science. Well, I say that is absurd because it is what I see here. So is my experience here as a science communicator and as a Brazilian citizen.
Thank you so much, Eric. Ms. Mashadi, would you like to add? Okay. Are there any other questions from the house? Okay, everyone is not talking, so I'm worried that I might not be audible. Am I audible?
You are quite audible.
Okay, I was just worried there for a moment. Well, firstly, I would like to thank the speakers for giving us such great presentations. I personally learned a lot from all of you, and my book is full now because I was busy taking notes. Thank you so much. It really shows that some things that we learn, we don't learn them in classes or in lecture halls, but we can learn them in such webinars, and we can make the world through science a greater and a better place. And I'd like to thank everyone that took their time to join us in our first webinar. You guys are the real MVPs. Please remember that we have another webinar next week, Friday, same time, different speakers that have amazing content to share with us as well. So I know that this month will be phenomenal because we have different speakers that are coming to share with us what they know, and it adds on what we learn during each and every HPW workshop, and we're becoming better and better citizens. And last but not least, if you're not part of a social media family, please do go on our Facebook page and press the thumbs up and like our page, and follow us on Instagram, and also subscribe on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Have a phenomenal night or day. Depends on where you are. Goodbye.